Well, hello there, everybody who's out there and watching. My name is Richard Boyd-Bard. I'm a TD with People Before Profit, and I'll be hosting this evening's discussion on arts and arts workers in the time of COVID, and what is the future for arts and arts workers in this difficult and strange, unprecedented time that we're now going through. We have a great panel to join us for this evening's conversation. Emmet Kirwan, actor and playwright. Many of you, I think most of you probably know him, and made a great appearance, should I say, on the Late Late Show recently. And it's great to have Emmet here. Angela Dorgan, who is the chair of the National Campaign for the Arts, and is also the CEO of First Music Contact. So her background is in music. She was recently received an award from IMRO for outstanding contribution to live music, and frankly has a list of credentials as long as your arm when it comes to music and the arts. We have Alana Daly Mulligan, who is a film and spoken word artivist. She has performed in bars and theatres from Cork to New York, tackling social issues by, to use her own words, playing with the heartstrings, focusing on feminist thought and her ever-evolving queerness. And we're absolutely delighted to have her here. We're also joined by Niall Breslin, excuse me, also known to many of you as Bressie, from the band The Blizzards, and who's been particularly outspoken about the plight of crew, the people behind the scenes who make the music, make the art happen, yeah, he wants to talk a lot about that and how important those people are, and how we really have to be concerned with the plight they face in the current situation. In the same vein, Tony Killeen, who's the production manager in events, is a board member of event production industry. I hope I get that right, and a member of the COVID-19 working group. Which is for basically to represent event-related businesses and all the technical people as well behind event-related and music-related business. I hope I got all those introductions right. And I'm reading my own scroll down here, my hand scroll. We also are going to have video contributions from a number of people. I should say at the outset, Christy Dignam, who was due to appear, has been unable to, at the last minute, has been unable to appear. He sends his support, but for personal reasons can't make it. But we are going to have video contributions from Mark O'Halloran, the well-known actor and writer, from Jesse Jones, artist and Dublin-based artist working in film installation. Dave Lorden, well-known poet and activist. Shiva Hennessy, who's a member of the rock pop band Hysterics. And Sinead McKenna, who's a lighting and set designer. So we have, I hope, a very broad spectrum of people involved in the arts and arts workers, front of stage, if you like, and behind the scenes. And hopefully that lots of people tuning in, and we're very keen to hear from all of you as much as is possible in the time constraints we have. So we're keen, if people want to make comment or ask questions to the panel or make any suggestions, to write in the comment section, and we'll try and get to as many questions and put as many questions to the panel as is possible within an hour and a half. And I know it's a beautiful sunny evening, so people will be keen to get back out into the last of the sun. So we'll try and keep within our time. So I mean, just to say very, very briefly that the reason for this meeting is because a couple of weeks ago, aware of the plight of artists, arts workers, and people in music and all across the arts, about the problems they were facing, the existential crisis really they're facing because of COVID-19 and the impact of public health measures. I asked for a debate in the Dáil on these issues. There was a big response online, huge numbers of people watching that debate, and a lot of feedback afterwards, which led me to believe that we should have further discussion on it. And obviously, I've been in contact over the years with the National Campaign for the Arts, who've been fantastic campaigners on behalf of artists across all sectors, and indeed have been in touch with the political parties in recent weeks, with the government and so on, trying to press certain demands and requests of government to assist the arts and arts workers in this particularly difficult time. And Angela will talk more about that, and indeed the link to their roadmap, a set of proposals really to try and assist arts and arts workers in the current situation, is up there, or should be available on screen in the chat section. I think the link to their document. So listen, that's it. And maybe the final word for me before I just go over to the panel and ask them the first question is to say, what I hope tonight will do is give an opportunity to just look at the impacts for artists and arts workers across the different sectors in this particular time, but also positive suggestions and proposals about what we can do to support arts and arts workers over the coming months, given the situation that we face. We're very keen to hear proposals on that. But I'm going to, without any more rabbiting on from me, I'm going to try and go over to the panel. And I suppose the first question I'd really like to ask is maybe just for the panel to talk for a couple of minutes each, just about how do they see or feel the impact of the current COVID-19 crisis in their, just personally, what do they think, but also how it affects them as artists or arts workers or producers of art. So maybe we could start with you, Alana.
Yep.
If you can hear me.
I can.
Right.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be talking at this evening. I suppose how it's affected me personally. I'm a college student, so I'm very, very fortunate in the sense that I have college as a backup. And for the last few summers, I usually would, about this time of year, I'd be planning gigs and where I'm going to perform. Obviously, with COVID-19, all live gigs have been suspended. So that form in terms of like jobs and work that way, that's been completely eradicated for me. I'm very new into the whole world of performing arts in the sense of it as a job. So it's a bit of a knock for me. But, I think the most important part about this whole thing is it's adapting. So it's a case of producing your own work and putting it online and hosting online events. And I suppose it's given me an opportunity to like write and pursue projects that I had left on the long finger for those rainy days. So it's been positive and negative for me, I think.
Yeah, well, I think that is the theme of people, not just artists, but of the reaction of many people to the current situation. That it's a dramatic change for all of us. The world has been turned upside down, and it's sort of presented many opportunities, but also huge worry and anxieties and fears as well on the health level, but in terms of people's livelihood and the future of that. So maybe Emmet, you might say a few words about, what do you think about this strange world we're in, the positive and the negative of the situation we find ourselves in?
Yeah, it's kind of strange. I don't know what the positives are really at the moment. One of the positive kind of outcomes in terms of the world that I kind of exist in, I suppose the Abbey did their Dear Ireland programme, and there was a real help to playwrights and actors because they cast the net wide, you know, they cast it as wide as they could, like with 50 writers and 50 actors. So the people are adapting and being quite flight-footed to change how they change and how they get around this particular crisis, you know. But for us, it's a weird thing, because if you're a playwright like I am, you're writing plays for a landscape that you don't know what it's going to be like in a year's time. It might have been a 200-seat theatre, but now that 200-seat theatre is going to have to be 50 seats, and you know, things like that just are not sustainable. Theatres cost a lot of money to run. The art centres all over the country, they cost a lot of money to run, and they depend not only on grants from the Arts Council and other public bodies, they also depend on ticket sales. And if they don't have the ticket sales there to fill in the gap, then many of them will become unviable. So there needs to be, and this is something, you know, that often in the arts world, they only see us as some people asking with our hands out saying we need money. But the thing is, you know, if you want arts, you have to pay the arts to survive and flourish. You have to pay for it. And there was supposed to be, and I know Angela will be able to talk more about this, there was supposed to be a year-on-year 7% increase in the arts, because we have the lowest arts spend of any European country. And that was promised to us 4 years ago, and it was supposed to increase year-on-year over the last 3 years, and it hasn't. So I'm not particularly hopeful for the future that they could maintain something like that, because like any other form of any other branch of funding, whether it be education or healthcare or whatever it is, you need to know 24 months into the future where you're going to be and what you're going to be doing. And you also need to know that the money that you're getting is guaranteed, even in a 12-month basis. But right now, you know, there's no guarantee of what kind of money artists or art organizations are going to be getting at all, you know.
I mean, in that sense, it's difficult to see. It's difficult to see the positives. And I was talking to, he couldn't make it tonight in the end, but Michael Barker Cavan from the Civic Theatre in Tala was making much the same points as you are, and maybe it's something I'd love to hear people's opinions on. You know, he was of the view, I hope I'm representing his view accurately, that the thought of theatres with a tenth or a quarter of their normal audience he just thought was worse than having no theatre at all. That it would just be unthinkable, because the essence of the theatre, and indeed, you know, maybe, well, people from a music background should make their own comments on this, but you know, the idea of all of this social distancing and the guidelines and the restrictions will just rob those live theatre or music events of their essence, and trying to do it partially is just not going to work. I mean, what do you think of that, Niall? Bressie, what's your view on it?
My view on the whole crisis is, I think we've made it a very statistic-based crisis. We've made all the kind of main topic of discussions within the media is all based around, you know, how many people have died, how many people have got the disease and the virus. And we lost a family member through it. Like, this is a very personal thing, and sometimes we get so lost in the, you know, the crisis, the statistical crisis that it is, and we forget that there's some seriously difficult stories that are going to come out of this. And when it comes to, I think that's the kind of the renowned kind of resonance of legacy of this crisis, is that, you know, if you're in a family that have lost somebody through it, you start to get a bit weird perspective around it. I was in an absolute, didn't know what was going to happen. I own a recording studio that's been empty for 8 weeks, and you know, anyone who has a recording studio knows there's not a lot of money in it, and there's very limited cash flow with a recording studio. So, but we'll get back on our feet business wise. This is a perfect storm, and that's why this crisis has been so truly so difficult for people. A perfect storm of anxiety, because it's professional, it's social, it's personal. You're worried about your health, your family members' health. You're worried about your economics. You're worried about your career. You're worried about your profession, and it's all colliding. The last recession, I suppose, was a very economic one. There wasn't that that horrible overbearing, if I go to the shop and I catch coronavirus and give it to my mother, that added incentive and uncertainty really drove an element of perspective for me. And one thing around the music industry, and I have to be very clear here in my own personal situation with the Blizzards, the Blizzards isn't my main job. I adore what I do. I love playing live music. And I'm not here to talk about, I suppose, there hasn't been a huge impact on us. We just made a record, and anyone who's made a record, you gig for 2 years just to pay that record off. You're not like going shopping with the money you make, no matter what gigs you do. So I'm quite used to being in a band where you're not really making that much income, and the live gigs are to pay to do other things that you then have to give away for free anyway. So it's the industry. The one thing about the music industry that I will say is we are immensely good at adapting and moving. And we showed it when the internet came along and Napster kind of came along. The industry crumbled. It was destroyed, and we were the first creative industry to be hit by the internet. I know that, like, the internet has huge benefits, but it came fast and it came strong. And the music industry, really was reeling for it. And now it's kind of finding a way to get back on its feet. And the way that the music industry's got back on its feet for artists is live. No matter what level you're at, whether you are the Rolling Stones down to, the gigs that we would do, 300-400 people. Live revenue is how you make your money. It is simply, that's it. So when that's gone, it's terrifying. And it's terrifying for bands that are also not just not making money, but in debt and have to pay things off. Because the banks aren't going to, say, that's cool, lads, don't worry about your €35,000 album that you just made. Hopefully you get back gigging soon. So these are the harsh realities. And I think the other reality that we talk about is crew. And the thing about crew is, this is, no matter how we tart this up, this is a full year that they're going to lose. A full year of wages and income, because this started Paddy's Day. This is not going to end, no matter even the most optimistic of us, till probably 2021 March. So I think a crew, I think the industry as a whole, I think the arts industry as a whole, and I am of course concerned, but I'm also quite optimistic because we've always prevailed and we've always adapted. But we might need a little bit of help on this one, and that's the reality I think we're in.
Thanks a million for that, Niall. And maybe that leads us into Tony and the people behind the scenes, the technicians, the crew, because we have tens of thousands of artists and performers, but we have also all those people behind the scenes, the crew and the technicians who help make it all happen, and maybe aren't as visibly impacted, but they're actually very, very seriously impacted by all this. And that uncertainty about live events for the foreseeable future must be having a huge impact, and it must be a great worry to all those people, Tony.
Yeah, at the start of this year, most people and companies were looking forward to going into a year that was looking really busy. There was a lot of bookings in, and it was running, a long summer. People had put in the prep work. Contractors had invested in equipment. Staff had committed, and then St. Patrick's Day, or in around that period. I'm involved in St. Patrick's Festival in Dublin, and suddenly it all stopped. And and even when it stopped, I think a lot of people felt it was just going to be for a couple of weeks. But as it went on, then suddenly you're looking into a black hole. It was such a shock, I think, how suddenly that people couldn't make a living. Like, I'm 43 years at this in the business, and this is the first year that just hit that wall. I cannot make a living, and it's not my fault. And companies, staff, crews, vendors, all the French, the caterers, all these, like, there are a lot of people that support events around the country. This weekend, just off the top of my head, like, Bloom is gone, Royal Hospital is gone, the mini marathon is gone. There's thousands of people that would have been working this weekend. Westport, bring the country into it, and there's nothing there. And people are concerned. And initially, the shock was, I suppose, financial, and the COVID-19 payments and wage supplements and that helped people get through that. But now they're looking at what is the future, and that's beginning to get into people's heads. There's definitely, I would talk to people every day, just, I suppose, keeping in contact, and it's now getting into people's heads that, you know, they're stressed, people aren't sleeping, and that is a big concern. I'm an optimist. The industry will come back. It may be different. Niall put it very well, like, you know, when the internet kind of changed our industry, but the industry returned, and like right across the arts and cultural community, people are very adaptable. We've had downturns, booms, all sorts of changes, and it will come back. It will be different, and it's just when, and it's that big unknown. You know, a lot of people have been making their living, and suddenly they can't, and it's the economic, and it's also that mental anguish, for want of a better description, mental anguish that a lot of people are facing, and that number is going to increase. So that's my view of it at the moment.
Tony, I think you really summed it up. You really summed it up there. And before I come to Angela, maybe talk about some of the other sectors that we haven't touched on and her take on this. I mean, I think all of us would say from the outset that the most terrible aspect, and Niall has referred to it, of this are the people who've actually lost their lives, and the families of those affected, and the concern and worry of those who've been sick and in ICU. But then beyond that, as you allude to, that sort of mental health pressure that's been on huge numbers of people and remains on many people because of that economic uncertainty and just the physical impact of the lockdown for so many people. I mean, really, it's been very, very tough, and may still continue to be for a lot of people for quite a period. Angela, what, as the campaigner, what's your experience? What are you hearing, and what do we need to do?
Well, I suppose I think I have a new, anybody who's on here who's a musician or works in the music industry know that I think every conversation should be a compliment, a context, and an ask. My compliment is to all of us as an entire industry. As Bressie and Tony says, we've been here before. We got cut. It's been death by cuts for this sector since the last recession. We have nowhere near recovered from that yet. As Emmet quite rightly points out, we are among the lowest, if not the lowest, investment in the arts as a sector. And I suppose the frustration for all of us, theatre, music, all live, dance, anything that has a performance element to it, this was not of our making again. Yet as a sector, we were there to keep people in isolation company. In terms of the mental health impact on this, on people working in the sector, but also in about, the salve that the arts have been to the rest of society cannot be underestimated. I think our frontline workers in the health system and in the food industry are doing brilliant work, but I think we can't underestimate the work also being done by arts. People are turning to books, they're turning to music, they're turning to theatre. So I think none of this is of our own making, and that's what makes it frustrating. The National Campaign for the Arts, I mean, I could talk absolutely about, and I'm seeing very familiar names down on the feed. I suppose the context then is that we're looking at the context, and what we did straight away was the NCFA developed a survey to measure impact. And then the Arts Council came out with theirs for artists, and subsequently then for arts organisations. So what we've done in our 13-point plan to government is put all of this in context. So we talked to we have about 1,000 members. They all fed in to the 13-point plan. Then we had a Zoom with over 400 arts workers and artists and organisations, and then we had a subsequent Zoom call and a feed-in process with resource organisations from every sector, including front stage, backstage, at stage, art centres, arts organisations. And the result of that is 13 asks. I suppose the context of those asks then are, for me, I suppose personally, for working in the arts for over 20 years, the most frustrating thing is to be constantly asked to define the value of the arts. And I'm kind of done with that, if I'm being honest. I think we don't ask about the value of education. We don't ask about the value of health. It's a given. The value of this sector that we all work in is seen in society, it's seen in mental health, it's seen in creative health, it's seen in the way our government after government, no matter what the makeup of it is, sells Ireland because of our art. So I think, first of all, TDs need to stop asking us to define the value. I think the other thing to recognise is that more than any other sector, the money that goes into our sector is paid back tenfold. So let's stop that argument. Let's stop the economic argument. It's now time for the next government and even the current government to decide what kind of republic they want to lead. And it has to be a republic in our mind that values its artists, and not by saying, tapping a Hosier or a Bressie on the back and saying, aren't you doing great? But really value the artists. And every person on here and every person who fed into and is represented through our 13-point plan are covered by how we think the government should save the ecosystem. Because if artists are working, then crew get to work. If crew get to work, festivals go on. If festivals get to go on, cities thrive, counties thrive. And what we think is that immediate investment is needed for the ecosystem. Every week to get paid. And I was really, really interested to listen to Alana there, because you need to get paid and have it not be tied to a performance or have it not be tied to one area of work. There have been some initiatives which some people have taken advantage of, and we need to be careful, that baby and bathwater scenario, that not everything is awful because it doesn't suit you. So I think we need to think like an ecosystem. I think we need to act like an ecosystem. And I also think the government needs to react to us in an ecosystem. So for the plan that we've laid out, it's around arts and artisation. And one of the main things we're asking government is to fund that and acknowledge the intelligence, the resilience, the innovation. My God, the art sector, more than anybody, could tell hundreds and thousands of companies how to run on a shoestring, because that's what we do every day, every week, every year. So to trust us that we have the intelligence and the innovation as a sector, workers, backroom, front room, all have the intelligence, as Bressie says, we'll solve this, but we can't solve it if we're not here. So our immediate measures are a stabilisation fund of 20 million to allow artists and arts workers to survive and not have to go to other industries to pay rent and pay bread and, raise their families, to provide the COVID payment extended for all arts workers and artists. And then for people like the Arts Council and Culture Ireland to keep funding arts organisations and artists and activities where arts workers can be employed, so that we can keep the sector together, not to have them jump through hoops or create when that's the last place where your mental health is. Some people will throw and they'll write a book and they'll write a play and they'll write a song, and others will just be frozen in time. And we should be supporting them to do both. And I think what can all of us collectively and individually do about it? And our aim of everybody here is this is where every single sector will be asking for money. The restaurant sector, tourism, all of we are not the only people hurting. But what we want is that people, if they can, talk to their politicians, because while we're doing the top down and we're briefing all the different parties with our plan, we need people on the street and on the doorsteps to be talking to their TDs and tell them how important the arts are to you. So in terms of the ask, I think David has shared the NCFA model, and also feedback. If you have feedback, please give it to us. And if we think everybody is, for the most part, in those 13 points represented in there, if you feel you're not, please do get in touch with us. And this is a constantly evolving process as well.
Great, Angela. And yeah, so people should be hopefully able to see on the feed. I think Dave is our technical guy in the background who's organising all this, should be able to see the link to the National Campaign for the Arts plans and proposals. But a question I want to ask, Angela, because, you know, obviously it's always been the case, to my mind, that you know, the arts shouldn't have had to try and justify its value. And now more than ever, as you rightly said, I mean, how would we have got through the last few months without books, film, poetry, music? I mean, it really is, it's just unthinkable. It's highlighted something that really we should know all the time, and I actually think most people do know. But strangely, and this is a question to all of the panel, it doesn't seem to be reflected in the priorities of government. And they don't seem to recognise how important and essential it is. And in fact, it's something I think, but this is a question to you, but certainly I feel, and I think a lot of people feel, is that all of a sudden we realised with this crisis what was essential. And there was a lot of people who are now starkly revealed as essential, not just arts workers, but shop workers in our supermarkets, the people who collect the bins, the frontline health workers that are protecting all of us. Why is it that the value of these things, arts and these things that are so essential and that we now see so clearly are essential, are not valued? I'd like to hear what the panel, Emmet, what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's how they view the arts. Essentially, the arts is a luxury. There's the reality of kind of like market values, and essentially artists find it incredibly hard to exist within a free market. You know, usually you just get swallowed up. Rents can push artists out of places, so those cities no longer have artists living within them. So the economics doesn't tally for them. You know, constantly we in the arts world, Andrew could speak to this, I know, have been trying to validate ourselves in terms of how much we bring, not to the artistic soul of the nation or the republic, it's how much we bring to the economy. So we've often had to kind of tow ourselves to the boat of tourism. So we can't actually talk about ourselves unless we're going to a minister going, well, actually, if you invest this €1, you get €2 back. And actually, tourists then will come in. But what happens is, the art that we start to make then is basically linked to something about, it's about how can we monetize our art. And the fact of the matter is, not all art can be monetized. Not all art in this current moment when you're making it might be actually successful here and now. You know, Waiting for Godot, if you pitch that to somebody, they'd turn around and say, nah, it needs a car chase. You know what I mean? Like, come back to me with a different idea that kind of will get bums on seats. So when you internalize market values and think that market values are artistic values, you get a very, very horrible type of arts that is gunning essentially for the tourist market in order to get tourists into hotels and into restaurants. And that's all great. It's a spillover. Hopefully it should be a byproduct, but it's not. So they're constantly looking for spreadsheets. You know, Grayson Perry did a pot years ago, glazing on the side. He said, this pot will reduce crime by 22%. Because people were trying to make, in the Blair government, the argument that if we invest in the arts, this will bring down crime, it will make people happier, it will do all of these things where we regenerate areas. But unfortunately, you can't track those things. It's far too nebulous. Did it bring down crime? Maybe. But you can't track it. Did it actually improve this area? Definitely. Did it make people happier? Definitely. But you can't prove that on a Google spreadsheet. So constantly you're basically trying to defeat the forces of markets with the language of markets, and that's just not going to work. You know what I mean? So you're dealing with the humanities, and people are just talking about cold hard numbers. So, you know, there's the real world, which is like artists just need to cop on and get on with it. So we're seen as a luxury as opposed to something that is a necessity. And also, just before I hand it over to the guys, so people are getting paid for the arts. It's usually not the artists. And often everybody at a gig, and Bressie will know about this, and the guys will know about this, a lot of people in that building that you're working in, the security guard, the doorman, the barman, the guy up in the building upstairs, in the office upstairs, they're all getting paid. But the spoken word poet like Alana, the musician, you know, they're not usually getting paid. And this goes for big festivals as well. Everybody's getting paid except for the artists because it's seen as something that you would just do anyway. So they think that, you know, so there's a culture around it as well that we don't have to pay for art. Art is essentially free. But, you know, it gives the country soft power all around the world. We talk about Ireland as being a great place for artists, and they use us, you know, quoting poetry and giving books of literature to foreign dignitaries and stuff like that, or the presidents when they go to visit Washington, but they rarely want to pay for that either. So there's a disconnect between what it gives to them. It gives them political capital, it gives them social capital and cultural capital, but they don't want to pay any financial capital for any of that cultural capital. We make it for them, but they rarely pay for it.
Well, you see, I'm trying to play the kind of independent host who doesn't give their own views here, but I'm very glad you said all those things. And I see all the panel nodding furiously to what you're saying, Emmet, and I think probably a lot of other people out there, just how true all those points are. And I was going to bring Alana in on, you know, to follow on really from that. Just before Alana, if it's okay, I was going to play a couple of our little short video contributions. So just to alert Dave behind the scenes, I was thinking maybe Jessie Jones, her little contribution, and Dave Lorden's little contribution, because they're kind of on the team that you were just talking about, Emmet, and then we'll go to Alana from there. So take it away, Dave.
Hi, I'm Jessie Jones. I'm an artist based in Dublin, and I'm also a massive fan of art. So I work at art, but also I consume art, I look at art. I have spent a lot of time these last few months looking at the incredible work that my colleagues and co-workers and fellow artists have been making. So first of all, I want to extend a big thank you to all the artists who've been working really hard in this period of time to make this art that we really care about and love. I suppose during this period of time I've also realised, which is quite undeniable now, that art is not such this luxury product that is reserved for an elite or a minority, but actually it's something that is a basic human need that we have to experience the world and experience ideas. And when we're so not physically connected to each other, it becomes so much more important to have this connective tissue between ourselves and the world, and give us this sense of belonging that I think art does. But also on the other side of this, as a worker, my income has been decimated by COVID-19, and I haven't had the same protections under the law as other workers in relationship to this. I haven't been able to access the COVID scheme because of some of the kind of structures around how artists' work is identified under this scheme. But this is not a new thing. Artists are used to this, where we've been treated very differently for a very long time, which makes absolutely no sense. We have to have housing the same as everybody else. We have to have healthcare the same as everybody else. We live in a very precarious economy for a lot of people, and artists are within that precarious economy, and even more so now during the COVID scheme. One thing that I think has really come to light by this different treatment of artists is the realisation that artists actually need to be treated the same as every other worker. Not just during a pandemic as a special event, but we need to be treated the same as any other worker. It would be illegal to not pay a worker to come to their workplace and work for weeks and months at a time, and then turn around and not pay them. It would be illegal. Why is it legal for artists to work in this way and to be expected to work in this way? This happens because we are at the behest of a very deeply underfunded arts culture in this country from government level. But it also happens because we're under so much funding pressure, arts organisations and institutions leave artists behind when it comes to our payment and our wages for our work. And I think that this is wrong. We shouldn't be asking to pay the artists as some special tokenistic event. We should be demanding that it is illegal to not pay the artist.
Great stuff, Jessie. I think we're just going to hear from Dave Lorden quickly, and then we're going to go to Alana.
Hi friends, my name is Dave Lorden. I'm a poet and a socialist and a lover of all the arts. I don't know much about any of the other arts beside my own, but I do enjoy them, and I do know that all the arts contribute far more to our well-being as a country and our economy as a country than we ever get compensated for, and that's going to have to change. First of all, I'd like to propose that we campaign for a levy on the thieves at YouTube and Google who rob all our content and do not compensate for it. Artists like me with quite a sizable audience online, there's lots of us. We don't get anything for it, so we need to do something about that, and I hope we'll campaign about that. I don't need any support from NGOs. In fact, in my field, the NGOs tend to be, counterproductive. They're nepotistic and cliquish and so on. So what I would like to see is that I'm taken out of the gig economy I'm in at the moment, by which I mean, like a lot of other artists. I work for various projects in arts and health, arts and education, arts and social work, arts and youth work. I think artists like me, and there's many of us who love our teaching and love our mentoring and love our social projects and things like that. I would like to see us directly employed by the state, permanent contracts like any other public servant, and paid properly for what we do for people and what we give back. So that's what I'm interested in campaigning for. I want to retain my independence as an artist, and I want to be properly compensated, and I want to be taken into the public service remit. So I hope people will join me in campaigning on that. Thank you very much, Dave Lorden.
Okay, so some very interesting thoughts from Dave and Jessie, passionately made. And I'm going to go to Alana to maybe to respond to that and to the earlier conversation. And I should say there are lots of people sending in questions, and I'm going to come to them after Alana and maybe put some of the questions and contributions that are coming in here on the comment section to the panel after that. So, Alana.
Yeah, so I suppose to speak to something that Emmet would have said about the performer getting paid, and that you go to an event and the barman would be paid and the doorman would be paid, but the actual performer wouldn't be. The worry that I have as a young artist, and the worry I have for young people my age who are going into this economy, is that they're going to be so struggling to try and make and break that they're going to do loads of freebie gigs. I know in the beginning of trying to get my work out there, you do work for free and you break your back doing work for free that you should be getting paid for. And I feel like young people won't know how to respond, or they won't be given enough support because they're not seen as serious artists until they build up a certain reputation with performances under their belt. So that would be one of my main concerns with this whole crisis.
Okay, yeah, and that's a real concern, isn't it? And also for many others who may be hit if we face into a period of mass unemployment, the pressure on people to work for little or nothing in desperation is very real, and maybe certain people benefit from these kind of recessions and economic crisis to that effect. Something we need to think about. I'm gonna just put a few of the questions that are coming in. One was specifically to Bressie, although Tony, others might have a view, has this pandemic changed live music performance for years to come? Is live music as we know it, what is its future as long as COVID-19 is around? That comes from James O'Connor. So maybe somebody would come in on that.
I suppose just quickly to jump in on something that the other guys I just wanted to say, and this is really, really important. And I don't mean this in a defeatist way. I think Angela is there's a plan there for government. There's a plan there to our policy and power merchants that we can go with. One of the things that I care greatly about is how can the people around me support our peers? I'm seeing a lot of musicians doing amazing things for amazing charities. I run a charity. I founded a mental health charity. I know how important it is to keep that funding. But what I really would love to see now is our peers standing together collectively to figure out what we can do to support each other. And that includes crew. So two of the things that we've done, and just in case I don't mention it, I'll get to James' question really quickly. is David Reed of Choice Music. Like, he came to me a year with this idea, and he wanted to provide free counselling for musicians. It was meant to be launched the end of June, but it's going to be launched on the 2nd of June because it's needed now. It's basically 24-hour counselling service for musicians, and it's called Minding Creative Minds. This is crucial because Angela said this. One of the things that I do most is with the charity is I see the power of the arts. Most people get their true solace and comfort through the arts and through good therapy. It's not through interventions from governments. It's through art. It's through people finding something comforting. My own case was when I was the height of my own fucking messed upness. I used to listen to Closing Time by Tom Waits and pretend I was in some bar in New York listening to this guy with a whiskey behind me, and it actually took me out of the headspace I was in. Arts is profoundly powerful. There's science behind what it does to us from a mental perspective. So that support is going to be available to musicians, because musicians are providing so much solace to people. Who's looking after us? Who takes care of us? And that's an incredible thing that Dave's after pulling together, and he wants to do it for crew as well. That platform is there now. We don't have to build another one. And the one thing I'm starting to notice is that all these amazing groups are starting. We need to be collective. There's no point in 10 of us doing 10 different things. Come together on this. So if we got the funding for that, we could provide that counselling support to all crew as well. And some of the things that we're doing is this events crew thing, events after the blizzards, and the events app started with Kim O'Callaghan, who's a neighbour of mine in Mullingar. And that it's just merch for crew to try and get funding to figure out, can we give funding to provide counselling for support? So that's the main message I want to say, Emmet. Who's taking care of us? And the greatest therapists of all. And that's what art is. We are the greatest therapists in Ireland. And we have been for generations. And just to get to James's question, of course this is going to hit us. It's going to change so much, but we are an amazingly adaptive industry. And I've said that. The events crew are, and that's really important about events crew. If we're going to get gigging back, we can't lose those events crew. They're a highly skilled group of people. We need to keep that skill retention. We can't let them go into other industries. It's what happened to the health industry here. A lot of our great doctors and psychologists and nurses left Ireland because they didn't want to work for our health system. And it wasn't a money thing. It was a conditions thing. We can't let that happen to a highly skilled workforce like our industry crew. And the way I'd say that, James, is if you really want to care about crew, let them all leave, and we'll put people with no experience and let them run an electric picnic next 2021 and see what happens, because you won't get one fucking band on that stage, I can tell you. Our crew are essential. We need to hold on to them if we want to get back gigging. The artists will be there. So gigging for me is an outlet. It's not something I do to make money. It's something I need to do because it actually is the only time that I feel completely at ease. So it's not just to provide a service. It's for us too. We need to perform. We need to be on stage, and I'll do everything I can, and I'm sure hopefully all my peers will, to figure out how the fuck we can get back to that space. And I really hope we will. And I think it's crucial not just for us but for our society. And events are a massive part of this country. They're a huge part, and they're a huge part of our youth subculture and their cultures. And I don't want to see them losing that. And that's not being dramatic. We lose those crew, we lose those shows. That's the truth.
Well said, Niall. Really well said. And you know, I have to say, my own thought has always been, you know, art is one of the things, if not the thing, that defines human beings. Is that creativity, that we're a fundamentally creative species, and it defines our being. And Jesse, I think, was alluding to that as well. But yeah, and that point about that skill, that pool of skill, that pool of talent, you know, if that's lost because our society or the people who run our society don't recognize how essential it is to our humanity, to our society, well, there's something really wrong with our society. And I want to on that issue of the skills pool, I want to come to Tony, who's in that area, and maybe to also kind of follow on from Dave's question about, you know, the role the state could play or needs to play in guaranteeing support and, you know, the retention of that pool of skill, technical skill, creative skill, without which we won't be able to go back to the events when that moment comes, as Niall is saying.
Yeah, for me, the big worry is that, when we get the go ahead and the live events and all the cultural activities start opening up, that there won't be the people there to get it up and running. I suppose an example that a lot of people would be aware of, somebody referred there to the loss of people to the medical industry, and suddenly we needed them back. But the same thing happened with the building industry. In the downturn, they left, they went to do something else. Suddenly we find ourselves in the middle of chronic housing shortage, and one of the big things that's prevented a quick response was the sheer lack of skills to get it up and running. And the same thing could happen right across the creative world, that when we get the go ahead, there aren't the skills there to start it up. Like there needs to be money there to support the arts community. Like there's a plan. Angela has put together a very comprehensive plan with short, medium, and long-term aspirations. And I suppose the government need to be reminded that it's not a handout; it's an investment. They go all over the world selling Ireland, and one of our big things is our education, our culture, our love of fun, our sociability, all of that. So it's an investment for staff, technicians, the COVID support payments for companies to retain staff. It's an investment. It's to make sure that when we can start again, that the skills are there to do it. And I suppose the question is, the live music performance industry change forever? It may be. It's very early days yet, but it will be back. Like, people love live. They love that live experience, no matter how good it is to sit and watch it with all the technology that's available. It's only a part experience. You see it with the kids. The kids are off school now, and for them, almost the lockdown is over. They're out socializing. The social media that they are slaves to normally have been abandoned. Around me, there's kids out, teenagers, doing what I would have done, hanging around, kicking a football. It's that live experience. So it will survive. It's just, I suppose, at the moment, we have just all the worries and no idea of how it will survive. But I am an optimist. I believe in it surviving. But there has to be an acceptance that money into the industry is an investment, not a handout.
Well, and I do want to, and we've got about half an hour left before we finish up, and I want to make sure that at the end of this, given all that worry, that we have some positive message to give to people about that there is hope. That if we act, if we organise, if we put pressure on government, if we make solidarity with other people who are also in difficulty, whose value we recognise and who recognise the value of arts and arts workers, that together we can do something. And I think it is important we stress that. But the sort of anxieties that Tony has referred to are really very evident in the feed here. Just to read out a few, because I just want to, I think it's important we hear from people watching in. Fiona Kennedy, singer and guitarist, as a professional full-time musician for the past 30 years. The virus has wiped out all of my work since March. There's no indication of when I'll be able to play live again and get paid for it. To say it's a worry is an understatement. I'm doing live streams for charity since the beginning of the lockdown, but earning a living from gigs looks very distant to me at the moment. Steph Giaconelli says, I'm a freelance live sound engineer who has absolutely no work since March, who will not have work for at least the remainder of the year and possibly a very long time into the future until social distancing is ended, not only here, but across Europe. There'll be no touring, no shows, no festivals, no large-scale events. The pub gig venues that we make our bread and butter on will not return until social distancing stops. Weddings, corporate events, etc., etc. I won't read it all, but you can see really the anxiety and the worry. I'll just read one more before I come back to the panel. How is drive-in concerts going to work when there's an open invention? Oh, okay, yeah, for a terrorist attack. I don't know. I think it's a slightly odd. How can security teams drive at concerts? Okay, I'm not. Yeah. I'll let people come back to that if I want. I think they're probably bigger worries. Joe Betts, rigging and staging rental company owner, employing 13 full-time staff and dozens of freelancers. As with everyone in our business, we've had no work in this 8 weeks since events were cancelled in Ireland. Okay, those are a few of the comments. So people are really worried. Excuse me, coughing away here. What do we have to do? What do we have to do, Emmet? Dave Lorden has suggested a couple of things there about, the state actually recognising the public service that arts and arts workers do.
I know we're short for time, so just really quick. Just mention in the comments there, and I know Jesse Jones is involved in this. There's a setting up of an artists union that hopefully would involve everybody working in the arts, backstage crew, everybody that's working out, all freelancers together. There's no real point, I think, anymore in Ireland having a union just for actors or just for musicians. There needs to be something that's for all artists, so we can have a collective bargaining power against any future government. Not against them, but essentially we can go in and argue our case, both financially, but also in terms of the humanities. There's things that we need to look at as well, like legislatively, because constantly we're viewed as kind of the we are a beggar class. Essentially, artists and people working in the arts, you earn between 8,000 and 15,000 a year. I know the Greens at the moment are kind of having a conversation in government formation about UBI. We need to start having a conversation in some form of UBI so the arts can go into a type of deep freeze. And that's for everybody in the crew so that they don't go off into other industries and work on other things. So a conversation around universal basic income, not just for us, because I am a socialist as well. So if there is going to be like housing for artists and UBI for artists, then it needs to be for everybody. But there's a possibility of trialing something in terms of UBI for the arts community. There's also something involved in legislative changes. These are things that they can do that don't cost any money. Musicians, for example, could get money from royalties if Irish radio stations were to change to playing 50 to 60% Irish music all the time. They're up against foreign American and UK A&R company, like the A&R department essentially of American labels, pushing their artists. So we should push Irish artists. Then they would get revenue from IMRO, from royalties, because they don't get that much royalties from streaming. They get none, more or less. As Bressie said earlier, quite rightly, they get it all from their live gigs. There's other things we could do around artist contracts, residuals for actors, residuals for voice actors. We're one of the only countries in the world in terms of royalties for our work. And this is all across the board. I'm sure other artists can talk, but I'm speaking from my own expertise here as a writer and as an actor. We get no residuals when we make films. So it's about who owns the work that we make and are we getting paid for it properly in perpetuity. So we need to ask the government to do something about that. If a company is going to come here and make a film, and I think the film industry is going to bounce back quite quickly. It has done in places like Iceland. It can happen here. If they appeal to something like Section 481, there needs to be an increase in the amount of actors they can use on that production. It needs to go from 50 to 60 to 70%. They did it with Game of Thrones in the North. They could do it for the same for us down here. So there's a number of legislative things that they can do themselves without actually even increasing the funding. Because as I said earlier, it's going to be a tough ask for us going to parties like Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and going, give us more money, because they will constantly turn it into a financial argument. So we need to find out what other ways as well, what we can get them to do legislatively, and then also basically pressure them to come into some form of universal basic income going forward. Because now's the time for us. If we can't bring back live gigs or whatever, artists need time and space, not to just be like this kind of productivity thing. We have to make things. Give them the time, give them the space to breathe, because that anxiety, as Bressie said quite rightly as well, is something that we all feel. And if you're being pressurized into kind of working and creating something, if there was a universal basic income for the arts and people working in the arts sector, it could give people the space that they need to create something. And then when this is all lifted, when we come out the other side of this, hopefully in a year's, like far shorter time span than a year, we'll hit the ground running with a lot of new work and a lot of new artists and funding as well for people like Alana. Just one last point. People will go, what's the point of theatre? There's an argument we can make towards government that we say, look, you people in this crisis, and as Angela said as well, they consume things in digital, you know, Netflix, music. Theatre's not digital. It's still an analog thing. And we're kind of getting to the point now where we film it. But people who watch Love Hate, they'll go, I don't want to pay for the arts. So you could say, well, look, Love Hate was written by Stuart Carolyn. Stuart Carolyn earned his bones, and I think he would agree with this, in theatre. And all of those theatres were government funded. So if you want the next Love Hate, if you want the next thing that you're going to consume, even if you don't go to the theatre, you don't see what the point of funding those kind of arts is, there's a likelihood that those supports for those artists when they're young will pay dividends in the end. And but unfortunately, this is the argument we continually have to make to them about the worth, or our worth, to the economy, you know.
Well, that's great. There's some brilliant suggestions, Emmet, and I see Angela wants to come in as well. And just to say, before I bring Angela in, that certainly you've got an open door here with me and with People for Profit, and both anything that comes up here and anything you suggest, I'll be keen to try and bring forward and encourage the government to give you guys an opportunity to be heard in the Dáil with these proposals. And just in relation to that, can I just say there's an email address which is flying around there, futureforarts@gmail.com, if people want to email in. And anything you want in terms of being kept in touch with what Angela, with the National Campaign are doing, suggestions like those, we'll feed them in to our activity in the Dáil, and obviously also feed back out any of the initiatives around the Artists Union that you're talking about, initiatives that the campaign are taking, because we want to back you up as much as is possible. Angela, you had your hand up and you wanted to come in there, I see.
I suppose given who we all are, and I'm watching the comments, and I think we're all of us are on the same hymn sheet, which is lovely and encouraging. I suppose I'd love to give people something practical to do, just to address two things. One is the immediate call, and I think everyone is ready, is that everyone in this sector, front of stage, in between stage, backstage, and organising, needs the welfare payment to be extended, the COVID, and not until a date, until we're allowed all back and until we're allowed sweat and tents. That's when the COVID relief fund needs to be extended to. And the second is, that's the first point in our call. And the very last call is investigating universal basic income. We're really hard at work to point to where that's already working. It's a no-brainer. We've had amazing tax accountants who have previously advised governments just offer their support to the NCFA. So we are working away on that. I want to give people something to do. So if you could, and with respect to Richard, and I'm sure you'll acknowledge, Richard and people like him get into government because we vote them to be there. So we are a huge sector. So join that union, follow the NCFA, and when you meet people, doorstep them. Talk to every single TD, talk to every single councillor. I want you to push these 13 ideas through, and to make sure you're in those 13 ideas. If you have a 14th and a 15th, give them to us. That's not a finite document. So if you want to feed in, please feed in. But doorstep people, these people are, you put them in government, so take them out. If they're not doing this, I think we have a chance for a new republic. And I keep having conversations about the COVID bounce. The bounce is that if we get the COVID extended, and that should be just our target. You know, there are loads of other things we need to be concerned about, but that should be our stealth immediate target. Every conversation you have, every hashtag, save the arts, COVID, relief fund expended, save the arts, because it's not just for us, it's our brothers and sisters in hospitality, it's our husbands and wives in you know, entertainment, in other forms of entertainment, it's everyone. And as Emmet was saying, you know, we're all linking Connell's chain in normal people, you know, there's every one of us is linked together in this story. Normal people, everything else like that that's going on, that's keeping us all company, has been made by techs, by, you know, if Connell's Hosier couldn't take us to church if there wasn't a music industry. Connell couldn't wear a necklace if there wasn't a costume designer. Let's get really real about this. And then I suppose one of the things we're doing next week is very kind of like the marriage referendum and the repeal the eighth approach. It's the hearts and minds that aren't at this Facebook page that we need to change. We need aunts, uncles, brothers and sisters to be doorstep ATDs, to demand that we all get the space we need to breathe, give Alana a support that where she's not tied to producing a piece of art about the famine because she's getting famine support, that she can just be an artist for a year and think about how she might interpret this after the event. And I think we have to remember that each and every one of us has a vote, and we have a say if we speak loudly enough to demand better of people for the arts, because it's not an other, it's not an elite, it's not a hobby. We are workers, we want to work, and you should bloody well fund us to work. If you're going to fund anybody, you need to fund us all. And I think you can demand that. We're doing a big piece of campaigning for Hearts and Minds next week. All I'm going to say is look at the ad breaks in between normal people on Tuesday night, and you'll see, and then share and hashtag save the arts, because if we're all doing one thing at the same time, we all have our individual concerns, I get that, but if we're all doing one thing at the same time, we are an incredibly loud voice. We're not the 14,000 workers that keep getting quoted back to us. We are 140,000 households. So I think if I could leave people with that energy, because it is bleak, but there's something we can do about it, I think.
Can I just say something quickly, Richard?
Absolutely.
Just to really back Angela up here. For 6 years, I've been working in another space in, you know, and working not just from a charity point of view, but seeing how government work and how governments and successive governments work. Now, I'm not getting political here because no government has got this right ever. I've seen our funding around mental health go from about 5 to 6% of the entire health budget for 6 years. I've seen the discussion around mental health explode. I've seen politicians over the last 3, 4 or 5 weeks saying how important it is and running these great ads on radio. It means nothing. It doesn't mean anything if you're still funding 6%. So I asked politicians 3 years ago, I asked them 4 years ago, I asked them 5 years ago, and I got the same answer every time. It doesn't get votes, Bressie. I've been told that by prominent politicians. The preservation of power is priority number one for governments, and that's the problem. So the reason I'm saying this for Angela and what you just said, Angela, if we're going to change this, what we've done around mental health is we stop lobbying government because they don't care about it until there's votes in it. We lobby people. We get people behind. We make people understand that this is your sister, your brother, your mother, your father. If you've ever seen a helpless mother who can't get help for their child, it is the most heart fucking breaking thing you can deal with. And I'm sure, Richard, you've dealt with it on a few occasions. This is the same thing. If we can get the general public to understand that without art, this country is nothing. It isn't. We cannot live. We cannot survive without it. And if we can get the general public, the festival goers who go to Electric Picnic, who adore it, the people who go to Forbidden Fruit, the people who go to St. Patrick's Day Parade with their family, to understand that that's the power of what we have here, and you have to vote on it if you care about it, then politicians will change it. And I'll leave really quickly with this. I live in Mullingar. I grew up in Mullingar. I have an army officer father. He grew up in the barracks here. The barracks has been closed for 10 years, 12 years. It's a place where all the bands in Ireland rehearse, in Mullingar rehearse. We've an incredible music scene, incredible art scene. It's incredible arts and heritage space. It's got huge history around 1916. And we just found out yesterday they're just going to build houses on it. And I made the debate to our local TD, and he said, listen, that's not set in stone yet. It's just a phase thing. I said, you're marching us from one crisis straight into another one, from a housing crisis into an arts and culture crisis, where you shit over anything that we have in this town. That barracks was closed 12 years ago, and army men and women all around Mullingar lost their jobs or got moved. because they want to build 200 houses there, and then they condescend me by saying, it's just talk. So for me, there's a space in Mullingar that if there was investment and outside the box design thinking from politicians, we could turn that into one of the most incredible arts and heritage spaces in the country. But it's not going to be that. It's going to be houses. To try and fix a housing crisis that was created by governments, and by not investing in that space, we're just going to shit all over another industry and another crisis. And that to me is where this comes. We need people, and that's it. We don't need politicians. We need people. And I think, Angela, what you've said is exactly what we're all saying. And we need our peers to get behind this. And that's what I want to do. And to leave you with that, that's the thing. If we're going to get momentum here, it's going to be together. It's not going to be shouting in 10 different directions. And I, for one, am completely behind anyone or anything I can do to support whatever is going to keep art at the prominence where it should be in this society, because it's crucial.
Well, listen, Niall, I couldn't agree more with that. And I see everybody nodding their head. It's people power. It's always what gets things done and brings change. And that's what we need on this. And sorry, what Angela said about the COVID payment is maybe one of those important moments, because that is something that potentially can unite all across the arts community at the moment, in that there is that support, which the government are talking about tapering and cutting and so on. But you can see they're a bit defensive about it. They're worried about it, and they should be worried about it, because I think there will be a lot of anger if they try and cut that payment. And it also potentially unites people from across the arts with other groups who are in difficulty at the moment. The taxi drivers, the Debenhams workers who just got sacked, people in retail who may not get back to work for some period of time. There's all sorts of people who will be threatened if they try and take that payment away. And I think there's a big potential to create a movement of people power to say no, and to start the debate about minimum income for people, a living income that people can survive on, and to recognize how essential people are, and they got to be treated with respect and not taken for granted. Now, we've got about 10 minutes left, and I think those messages have come across very clear, and I want to get Tony and Alana in as well, and maybe get quickly back around the panel before we finish. I do want to just quickly play a few more of the contribution videos that we got from people who I mentioned earlier on, because we're delighted that they're supporting this initiative. So maybe Dave could play the contributions from Mark O'Halloran and Shiva Hennessy and Sinead McKenna. Maybe just play all three of them. They're very short. They're about a minute each. And then we'll have a last round from the panel, starting with Alana and Tony, and then try and bring things to a close, and hopefully conclude with a few practical suggestions beyond those that are already been made about how we take things forward from here. So, Dave, would you?
My name is Mark O'Halloran, and I'm a writer and actor, and I'm offering my support for this campaign to encourage the government to bail out the arts industry in this moment of absolute crisis that we're going through. It's an industry that has not even recovered since the savages of austerity, and it's an industry that is looking as if it may be closed right till the very end. All theatres, all cinemas, and unless we want to lose a whole generation of artists, something has to be done.
I'm Shiva Hennessy from the band Hysterics, and I'd like to voice my support for this campaign. I'd also like to voice my disgust, if not surprise, at the absolute contempt being shown by our government for arts, for artists and for art workers. They seem entirely unable to conceive of the arts for its own inherent value, independent of its ability to bring in profit. Like so many other things for this government, if it's not profitable, it doesn't matter. But that's just not true, because when it comes to the arts, like many other things, the arts are actually inherently part of what it is to be human, and deprive people of arts, and you're depriving them of something really, really inherent. So art is really important for the social good. We've seen that more than ever in the course of the pandemic. Many of us have been saved by the offerings that have been available through live streamed concerts, theatre, online virtual tours of art galleries, films, you name it. It's really been amazing. And if you didn't understand the value of arts before this, you certainly do now. Of course, the government hasn't seemed to pick up on what everybody else has. Or if they have, they don't really care. It's so disappointing because this government is certainly not shy about, riding on the coattails of Ireland's reputation as a heavy hitter in terms of the arts, in terms of our reputation for writers and musicians and culture. So it makes it all the more two-faced and sort of just sickening, really, that they won't back that rhetoric up with any meaningful support for artists. Art is such a precarious sector that, it does attract people, not uniformly, but it does attract people who have that flexibility in terms of financial security, perhaps already. It's a sector that really does... that a lot of people do not have access to. And the world is being deprived of the art that surely exists out there that we're not getting to hear, because so many communities and so many people have not been given access to the arts because of the absolute lack of encouragement or support or community kind of resources. So we really need to fight for this. I think it's brilliant that we're having this conversation tonight. There's a huge problem, and let's really unite and fight this from the grassroots up.
Hi, my name is Sinead McKenna, and I am a lighting and stage designer working in Ireland, the UK and internationally. For a small country, we get around, and our work is recognised worldwide for the quality of our writers, our performers and our design. The creation of lighting, design and staging are extremely complex and technical processes and don't just happen by magic. There's often the impression that these things are thrown together by unskilled, hairy techies, but the reality is that we are a highly trained, highly skilled task force. People with degrees, with masters, with decades of highly specialised experience. We are people with families, with children. It's one of the lowest paid industries. We work long hours tirelessly because we love what we do, because we believe we need art, we need entertainment. We need to hold a mirror and look at ourselves. It's what makes us human and is at the heart of democratic society. It's taken us decades to get where we are, a country with international standing in excellence, and we punch way above our weight. Many of the teams I work with will be out of work for months, possibly years to come. We will lose the skill sets it has taken so many years to grow. We need to protect and retain these skills, or when the time finally comes to switch the lights back on, there'll be nobody there to do it.
That's great contributions from all there, and a really great response. I just haven't had time to read out all the contributions coming in here in the comments section, but a lot of people talking about the COVID payments, the need to keep it up, the wage subsidy scheme, and so on. And a lot of comments about the people backstage, the technicians, and that skills pool that Tony and Sinead just talked about there, Niall has been talking about. So I'm going to try and give everybody a last spoke and any plugs they want to make. And I've been taking note. I just want to emphasize some of the practical proposals that people have been made, and I'll just maybe briefly summarize some of those at the end. But I'm going to go back to Alana, and she might take up the discussion.
Well, I suppose to close, I think something that I'm really passionate about as a young creative is education and educating our young people that a future in the arts is possible and is very tangible. even in these difficult times, I think we should be assessing our education system and making sure that we're making amendments to it so that young people are aware that this is an avenue they can go into. I think we need to, you know, it was something that was said earlier that unless we want to lose a generation of artists, we need to support young people now, and we need to support people in this time. So really, like, I think everything that needs to be said has been said. Just support artists. Like, you know, we are the lifeblood of this country. To be Irish and to be an artist is an absolute honour. And if we lose that, we lose a huge sense of our cultural identity. And our government won't have a leg to stand on if they don't support it, to be quite honest.
Great stuff, Alana. Very much to the point. Indeed, I might just refer to that man behind me. You know, he was writing plays. There weren't brilliant plays before he led the Irish Citizen Army out in 1916 to try and establish this republic. But he commented often about the importance of arts as being a critical factor in the revolution and the free country that he fought and died to try and create. So that connection between arts and, you know, the society is very much in the tradition of this country, if I said that right. Anyway, Tony.
I think the big thing for the whole industry is that we keep pressure on the government to extend the payments, both the support, because there's a lot of contractors out there trying to hold on to skilled staff, and, you know, they need that support. And then the freelancers, all the various professions and craftspeople that are shut down by this crisis need the COVID payment to extend, and it's pressure on the government to do that too. And I suppose we should all stand together, and it's important that all the different, like, we're not the biggest industry, but we are very diverse. There's all branches, and it's important that we remember we all have to support each other, and we're interdependent. It's, you know, we're nothing without the artists, and they need us. So it's solidarity and push for support. We need support to be there to turn on the lights.
Great stuff, Tony, and again, very much to the point. And just one point to kind of following on for that, for Niall and Angela and Emmet to comment on as part of their finishing up their final comments. Michael Barker Cavan also was very keen to emphasise in the chat I had with him, even though he can't make it tonight, about not just the interconnectedness between the arts and artists and arts workers and the production people in the arts, but its interconnectedness with the community and with other groups of workers who are out there, who are struggling, who are often not valued, who are not recognised for the important role they play in keeping our society functioning and making it a decent place. So I just, you know, maybe like as part of your finishing comments to comment on that connection of what we've talked about tonight to that wider society and to other groups who are struggling at the moment. Niall, maybe you.
Yeah, I think it's important before, you know, I finish up anyway, and we all finish up, to say this, the practical things that, you know, and I know I'm not doing a politician's thing here, Richard, not answering your question. I'm just, it's important. I do say this. I really want people to check out this Minding Creative Minds project that's launching on the 2nd of June. This is free counselling, 24/7 counselling systems, and a free 6, if you require it, psychological first aid for every musician in the country. And David Reid has worked his arse off to get it to this point. I've seen what he's done. David has a master's in psychotherapy. He understands this area very, very well. And he set this up. This is a structure that has a lot of governance and a lot of work you have to do to get at that place. Now, we can scale that to support crew. So crew who are going through difficult times. Now, it's not money, but it's support for their emotional needs. If we can get funding in place, we can support them, and it's not a lot of money. And we can do it now. We don't have to create anything new. These are real solutions that we can start looking at now. The other thing that we did was we set up this the Blizzards and Events app. This merch, we've sold 500 or 600 hoodies and t-shirts. Every cent is going, the profits are going to our crew. It's going through ACE, which is the because they have a union, they have a board, they can manage the money, but it's open to members and non-members. You know, if go out and buy some of these t-shirts, so these hoodies, that's directly supporting our crew. Get them on wearethesupportact.com. So these are the things I suppose I can do, is how do we look after some of the emotional needs and support systems that our crew are going to need and our artists are going to need over the next couple of months and years. Angela's doing incredible work on the governance stuff of how do we actually keep those payments? How do we actually ask for the steps? I'm 100% whatever I can do in that regard, but Angela's nailing it. And we all have collective different skill sets that we're good at, and we should honor those skill sets, put them together and be collective. And the final thing I'll say on the whole thing is I think it's really important that we get hairdressers back to work, because look what my mother did to me about an hour ago. She's absolutely destroyed me. So I would also be calling for getting hairdressers back to work very, very quickly as well, if there's anything we can do about that. Richard.
Hey, listen, you're looking good. Look at the state of me, for God's sake.
No, look at this. I'm 39, Richard. Look, I'm not meant to have a haircut like this. Look at the state of it. What was she thinking? Anyway, yeah. It's okay, Mom. I'm not, she wants me to pay her. Anyway.
So, look, we're going to finish off with Angela and Emmet, and just to say that, you know, a few things have been already said, and I'll just reiterate them, which I think definitely there seems to be consensus on. The COVID payment, we really have to unite in the fight to ensure that that payment is retained, that the additional 20 million for this year and next year, that the National Campaign for the Arts is saying is a minimum figure, I would say a minimum figure that they have to give. And it is worth mentioning, they've given 6.5 billion, mostly to big business, some to companies that are registered offshore and don't even pay tax here. So it's not a big ask to give 20 million to the arts. To seriously start a campaign for a universal basic income for arts and arts workers. And indeed, I actually think that debate goes beyond just arts and arts workers. To take measures to protect the skills pool, to guarantee the retention of that skills pool and the income support and state supports necessary to maintain that skills pool. The issue of royalties and residuals, which actually isn't talked about enough, that Emmet has mentioned, which is terribly important. I mean, I don't know if people know out there. I didn't know until people like Emmet told me that these residual payments you used to get when your work was played again or performed again and broadcasted again, that artists aren't getting these things anymore. It's absolutely disgraceful. Emmet also mentioned the Section 481 and the need for that very, very large amount of money that goes into film to be linked to guaranteeing work for actors and performers and crew. I think it's important to say and crew in the film industry, so that they have security of income and employment, and that it really actually helps build up that pool for the film industry. So those are some of the things that have been said, and I think hopefully we can take forward out of this meeting and build a big campaign. I don't know, actually, Dave might tell us what the numbers are viewing in, but even the numbers that will have been here today are a message to the government, which hopefully will put a bit of pressure on them. But if there's any last words, suggestions, ideas, thoughts that Angela and maybe then Emmet could try and finish off the meeting for us.
I just, Angela, I'd like to give my time over to Angela, because those guys in National Campaign for the Arts they have a detailed plan. So I
was going to...
Sorry.
This is no you first. I was literally going to say I'm going to be very quick so the last word can go to an artist. I would say just all stories are local. We're all individuals working in the arts in one form or another. You're an artist, you're an art worker, or you're a member of an arts organisation, you're a freelancer. I'm so encouraged about all the speakers, all the contributors. Sinead, I know, just nailed it. I suppose I want us to panic a little bit, and then I want us to have hope. Our house is on fire. We didn't start the fire. It'll probably be up to us to put it out. I think there's don't feel that it's for your mental health and your creative health. Don't feel it's yours to put out on your own. So I will say that the NCFA and people like us right across different sectors are talking to each other. We're talking to media about the idea of an arts bulletin, like you get a sports bulletin. We're talking to tourism and food and sport to see what we have in common that we can collectivize, not just the NCFA collectivize the arts, but that we can collectivize with other people in society that we're linked with. And I think, Richard, you kind of nailed it, because we are, all of what we do has an audience. But there's sometimes a mismatch that people think just because you're an artist, you're not an audience. I think people in the arts support each other's shows, theatre performances, spoken word performances more than anybody else. But I think we will bear the responsibility of coaxing the audience back. They will be scared. I went into my office today and I was a little bit freaked, and that was just about walking through town. So it's our job to make it safe, make it feel safe, and that's going to go on us. So I think we need to stop apologizing for ourselves. I think we need to stand up. I think we need to collectivize. And I think for NCFA on a very selfish level, I would echo Bressie. I think Dave Reid is doing great work, and anything that helps anybody get the support they need and want, then I'm all for it. On a practical level, next week for the next 2 weeks, we'll be doing a Hearts and Minds campaign. Please share it. Please follow us on NCFA on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. Go to ncfa.ie and sign up, because if you have and live in a locality, we'll be giving you email addresses, talk to your politicians. So we have all the stuff to give you. We'd love your help. So I think collectivize, but think locally. Don't think it's all down to you to fix. But if you do one thing and you think it might help the girl or the guy next to you, then that's amazing. And I also think in times like this, I'm going to be watching Alana for peace of mind. I'm going to be listening to music for peace of mind. I'm going to be watching all his amazing the past, and they're going to bring me peace, and they're going to bring me drive, and I hope they do the same for all of you.
Absolutely. Emmet, you gave away your time, but if you do want to come in and say a last few words, we're just on time, so you have a minute if you want to.
Really quickly, if there's one thing about the arts needs to be seen as a viable profession for young people, as Alana said, to go into. There's something that's I'm afraid is going to be brought in, and Bressie's right. We keep on hoping that the politicians won't do what they've done before, and then they always revert to type, and then they do it. So ultimately, we can't trust them. So we need to, as I said, doorstep them, and challenge them about their policies around the arts, but also challenge them their policies around education, and especially third level education. If third level education fees are brought in, nobody is going to take up, not nobody, but a very few number of people are going to take up arts degrees, especially people from backgrounds where it's expected that they will go out, get a job and make money. They need to know that there is a life for them after college if they do an arts degree, where they won't come out with 60 or 70,000 euros in debt that they owe because of some sort of bank loan scheme to pay for a third level education. You introduce something like that, what happens is you start to get arts that becomes incredibly monocultural, and it's happened in Britain already. Actors can only train in RADA if they have 50,000 euros, 50,000 pounds a year, or 40,000 pounds a year. So instead, what happens is you get a lot of actors from very wealthy backgrounds and not spread across, like from all different parts of the culture. You know what I mean? It becomes monocultural. So that's another thing to challenge our politicians about going forward, that, education and arts degrees and a life in the arts is something that's viable, so they can't reintroduce third level fees.
Yeah, great point, Emmet. And you might add into that, if we had housing that people could afford, and if we had childcare that people could afford, these things would.
Only live in London, you know what I mean? So
exactly. And hey, listen, I did an arts degree and I ended up involved in politics. God knows how that happened, but yeah. But listen,
step further. Grows out after a few days.
Does it?
No, it's a long torturous process. You're gonna look like a freak.
I know.
Yeah,
I don't
do.
care. I'm hanging out in Mulligan. It's all good.
I'm only kidding with you.
I'm
But listen, I just want to thank all of you, Emmet Kirwan, Angela Dorgan, Niall, Breslin, Tony Colleen, Alana, Daly, Mulligan, for brilliant contributions in this somewhat bleak time and the rather grim picture we painted at the beginning. Actually, a bit of defiance and hope has emerged about the possibility of fighting on and fighting to change things coming out of this awful situation. Thanks to all the other contributors, Shiva, Dave Lorden, Mark O'Halloran, Sinead McKenna, Jesse Jones, and to everybody who's tuned in and all those. And I'm sorry I didn't get to all the messages that came in, but they were all very, very positive, some great suggestions. And there is that email there which is flying across the screen. If you want to be kept in touch, anything that NCFA are doing, we'll put out to anybody who's attended this meeting, Angela. So it's an open door for us to communicate anything you're doing. Same with the Artists Union that Emmet was talking about. And of course, the initiatives that Niall is involved in. Any further details you want on them, just leave your email. We'll get back. We'll let you know. And indeed, if you are interested in socialist politics, you can leave your email as well for People Before Profit. So,
Richard, could I just say, on behalf of everybody, I think more than a number of us watched you stand up in the Oireachtas, and I think do a very good job on all our behalves. It was especially encouraging. We were knee deep in writing this 13-point report, and I know your words and those of those with a similar vein to you in the Oireachtas words that night were so encouraging and so welcome. And I think for all of us to hear voices like yours in that chamber is really important. So thanks for that, and thanks for getting us together tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks a million. I appreciate that. And listen, let's keep the conversation and the movement and the people power going over the next while, and we'll become a force they can't ignore. So listen, thanks to all of you. Hopefully I'll talk to you all again soon, and let's keep it going. Cheers.